In Mexico once, there was this Mexico City in this forensic hospital I was working in several times. There was this magnificently beautiful woman, and she was on the slab, stripped of her clothes, ready for an autopsy. She was about maybe 20, and she was just beautiful. I could smell her hair, the shampoo in her hair, and then whatever. And the doctor says, "Photograph her." I said, "I can't do that. I mean, the family's out there crying. They're hysterical, and she's known, and I can't do that." And so, I mean, that would be a crime. That would really be a crime, because talk about an innocent. You can't be there. There's 2 times in life where you're totally innocent: before birth and at death.
Once upon a time, Judeo-Christian faith and lifestyle were at the heart of Western art and culture. It has been said that the passion and reverence of the Renaissance painters, for example, was so strong that their work had the power to convert those who viewed it. Today, artists in America are insisting they have the right to show obscenity and even blasphemy in art, and even use tax dollars to pay for it. But when it comes to perversion and blasphemy, artists Robert Mapplethorpe and Andre Serrano have nothing on photographer Joel Peter Witkin. Witkin's critically acclaimed photographs have appeared in the best galleries and museums. Obsessed with religious symbols and specializing in portraits of human freaks, Witkin's book, called Gods of Heaven and Earth, includes a written appeal for models who might fit his so-called artistic requirements. He calls for erotic contortionists, boot, corset, and bondage fetishists, all manner of extreme visual perversions, anyone bearing the wounds of Christ, anyone claiming to be God, and finally, God himself.
Joel Peter Witkin, who is he? He's a photographer born in Brooklyn, an identical twin, an artist, a visionary, a theatrical inventor, someone with an enormous compassion for human weakness. This is someone who's a spiritual reformer and who's trying to, when you look at a picture of his, get you to look deeply inside yourself, and you don't escape. And the ones who do escape by sort of brushing off their clothes and saying, "Get me out of here. I'm out of here, man. This guy's a ghoul." It's easy. The hard part is to stay with the pictures. And those who do are amply rewarded.
I make photographs worthy of the human spirit. To understand my work, the viewer agrees to enter a world of belief and wonder, of time and timelessness, of hope and fear, in order to confront the heights and depths which form our lives. My life is basically the way I live it, the way I work it. In my work, I create the best solution, the best circumstances out of things, situations that may be very strange or unsavory. But I really want to bring light into that kind of darkness and confusion.
I think the fact that Joel has described death or an used corpse for people it can be, they don't understand his work, because in fact for Joel, death is part of life. It's true that in our society, death has been more or less forgotten by a human being, and we want to avoid it.
When you see his picture, there's lots of humor, but also very dark side of life, which is death. And when you see him, he's very generous in everything he shows. The way he dresses, the way he smiles, the way he looks at life. It's very positive.
He wants to find the images that touch that discovery of the truth that isn't always a pleasant one.
My life experience in growing has been part of my work and my life. So my life and my work are inseparable. It is a privilege and a great responsibility to devote your life to art. My vocation is to create totally personal and unique art, which is the transformation of my vision into photographs. When we get ready, and this should go pretty fast, when your outfit is on, that means the shirt, the pants, the harness below that, of course, and the coat. We just have to stitch the sideboards on both uniforms. And then we're going to hit the outfit and yourself a little bit with dirt, this theatrical dirt stuff.
I'd been visiting the Frankel Gallery for years, and one day one of the people in the gallery said to me, "Take a look at these images." And so he started pulling out images of Joel. I was taken aback. I was somewhat shocked, but I continued looking. I didn't turn away, and when I left the gallery, I kept thinking about the images that I'd seen. And at that point, I was collecting some artwork, but I started collecting his photography from that point on.
I first saw his work in 1985 at the Gray Gallery at NYU. And I walked in there and I saw The Kiss.
This is probably my most famous photograph because it was done in '82, and it basically made my reputation.
He had permission from the University of New Mexico Medical School to photograph this piece of cadaver, and he picked it up and it fell into two pieces. It had been laterally bisected. So he just put the two together in a kiss. It was as if they were identical twins that had met again.
What happened is that I waited about a year to get a specimen, and I get a phone call saying that they have something for me, and I didn't know what it is. I can only use it 24 hours, like a kind of a XX book. And I went there, had a very good breakfast before I left, and because I knew I was going to work for a long, long time and try to basically resolve an image with whatever was in the box. I picked it up, I took it to my studio at the university, and I worked about 12 hours or so on something called the history of Spain. Didn't work at all. Didn't work at all. And I got some sleep, and I got up, and I said, well, it didn't work, so I guess I'll just pack it up. I only had a few hours left. And but I took the two heads, pieces of the head that was cut in half before I got it. I don't cut anything myself. I just talked to a person yesterday, a collector, who says that when I photographed the kiss, that supposedly I cut the head in half. And that's not true. People believe that, and they think I'm maybe a monster. I don't engage in that. People who do that are in the medical profession, and ethically I can't do that. I never would. They were in formalin. They were wrapped in this gauze permeated with formalin. And when I did that, put them together to wrap it up, the lips kissed. And I said, that is the elegant solution to this problem.
And of course, as soon as the medical school saw what he had done, they ruled him out. He was persona non grata forever?
I was on food stamps. Okay? And I worked in a restaurant. I didn't want to work, there's nothing in photography here. I mean, there's some architectural photographers and commercial photographers are so terrible. I could pass by their studios and there would be a stench, an aesthetic stench I could feel. But anyway, I worked as a busboy. I think I was 41 years old. I started late. And I got this job as a busboy, but I loved restaurant work. And I eventually became a waiter, then the head waiter. Then I would hire and fire people and train them. And all along I would do my work in the daytime at the university. Had a darkroom. The tuition was only $100 a semester. And so I'd work, make photographs and print, and then go to work at night in the restaurant. The ugly, ugly thing is that I had actually printed the whole edition. I think there were 15 prints. I had the master print. And where I was in Sarah Reynolds Hall at the university, there were these guys that would come in, Chicanos, and clean up, no problem. And I had a separate storage room where I had any number of jars with fetuses and arms and hands and whatever. And I had a rack, a drying rack for the whole edition. And I was working at the restaurant. It was a Saturday night, and my section is full with people. I have a guy who's my busboy who's just learning what to do. And then I get this phone call from the campus police saying, we found babies, in your dock room, and we took all the prints that were on the rack.
He not only is never allowed to come to the anatomy department of the University of New Mexico again, because they need the contribution of these body parts to do their work to train the students. And they thought that since he had broken that trust, and he didn't realize he was breaking the trust because he didn't know the head was in two parts. It just fell open like this. And he put it together in a certain way.
It was only because the university had hired a white guy, a gringo, who happened to be a born-again crazoid. And he saw the fetuses and he reported them as a crime without knowing, what's going on. At least had that decency, and he didn't. So I went there, and luckily for me, the whole edition, they could have ruined the prints, but they didn't. Everything was intact. And the next Monday, I went over to the university, and I found out that the professor who gave me these specimens would be fired. And I said, that's not right. I mean, he did it on his own judgment, and I've done nothing wrong, and they're going to fire him. So I said, wait, I'll surrender the negatives. And so I surrendered the KISS negative and a few others, and it saved him his job. That's why this is never printed big, and part of the reason, too, that it's worth a lot of money is that there's no negative. So only the prints are out there, and then this is the master print.
People who don't understand Joel's purpose at all, or could never be persuaded of it, there's no argument. You just simply have to walk away and apologize.
Actually, a few years later, they offered me a job. They offered me a job as a photographer there. I said, because the administration changes, and they know nothing. And it was okay with them. But I didn't want the job. I didn't want that. By that time, I was photographing all over the world.
Whenever he finds a corpse, or he has to make many special arrangements to get access to these bodies. In Mexico City, where there's no policing of any of this stuff, he just goes into the morgue, he gets the permission of a physician to go in there, and he did. He wandered around, he opened drawers where there were pieces of cadaver, and used them the way you would colored paper making a collage.
This is in a forensic morgue, and a doctor was showing me, and this horrible, the smell you can't believe. There's nothing that smells as bad as human decay. And there's a lot of it there. It's not air conditioned. In fact, the head pathologist has a dog that comes in every Thursday. I guess he has the dog for the day, I don't know. It's a huge Mastiff, and the Mastiff goes around sucking the blood on sheets, licking cadavers. It's horrible, it's horrible. And no one says anything about it, because that's Mexico. But anyway, he showed me this trough full of body parts, and I saw this leg, and I found out through my translator that the leg is the leg of a woman that was, the left leg of course, that she was run over on the train. She's living somewhere, she's alive, but that's her leg. And this was the result of what the train did to her body, and they didn't throw it out. The case was probably covered like months ago, but the Mexicans kept everything. And the stench you couldn't believe. There were, arms and legs floating around. And I said, I'll come back tomorrow, I'll get an idea for this leg. And I happened to eat at a German restaurant that night, and they had these really, really beautiful, heavy napkins. And so I bought one, and the next morning, I planned the shot at night. I made this little sketch, and I went to a market, and I got the bread, and the fruit, and the fish, and cleaned the leg up. It took me longer to suspend the leg with what I could find in the corridors in the hospital, sticks and stuff I found outside. But it was a very, very elegant image. I still love the fact that this looks like caviar. And this particular dangling piece of meat was over in the back, and I kind of moved it around for the shot. It was very, very critical. It's a very, very elegant image. For me, it's a very, very beautiful still life, and it acquaints a body part with bread and other things we eat and consume. So it's a metaphor about life.
The dead people that he photographs, he doesn't always, I think, see them. They are actors that he needs to stage the theatricals with. And they're precious to him. They're part of his repertoire. And he's very careful about what kinds of actors he chooses. It's not just anyone.
Joel is a very sensitive man, and very aware of his work. If you let him do, he would work 24 hours a day. He has a good sense of humor, but he likes and loves the family style life. I can see that with the work. He likes to be in confidence. He likes to work again with the same people.
He's a real hard worker. He has a work ethic. He really knows how to work.
I drive myself, not because I'm a workaholic. It's my fascination and destiny and love to do what I'm doing.
And he knows how to engage others in his projects. He has a lot of very faithful assistants who paint the backgrounds. He sometimes takes them to Paris as a kind of present. A lot of very faithful friends. Not too many, but the ones who are on his side, you could say, are faithful friends.
Well, I'm Chris Mills. I'm a sculptor. Thanks to Joel, now I'm a painter. I help him do some of the setup for his work, like including painting backdrops and painting directly on photographs, and then doing lettering on photographs, sometimes building props. And that could be welded or fiberglass or clay, whatever. When I was in graduate school at University of New Mexico, I worked for a guy named Dan Byrne, and he had a shop, and Joel would come in and he would, I think one of the first things is he wanted me to build an arrow for Cupid to hold. And so he went to Dan and said, could you do this? And Dan said, talk to that girl over there. Because I was like on Saw or something like that. And that's how I met him. And he told me some jokes. And later on he remembered that I was there and would come back and always ask for me to cut something else for him. And it was a lot of fun. So.
How do you like that?
I need to put them together, but I still knock off the bottom a little bit.
Let me make them identical,
Yeah.
and then you can look at them.
And all this, by the way, is a ruse because your house is being robbed.
How many shoots do you think you've been part of with Joel?
I think once a while back while I was a little bit drunk, I questioned that. And I think I kind of gave up. I know it would probably surpass. It's definitely been 11 years of several shoots a year. So, and then before that, it was just piecemeal stuff sent around, you know, like props. But I didn't start getting involved in shoots until 2001, I guess.
This goes around your waist, and then the belt goes over.
Where's his board?
Right over here. Maybe that looks good. That's perfect. Man, it was worth the 200 fucking bucks. Right? You know we have rope, you know that little rope.
This is a story of Joel and Joel. Of how the day of September the 13th happened. 1939. It so was that I went to the hospital 3 weeks before the September the 13th. And when I got to Bushwick Hospital, my doctor wasn't there, but upon examining me, they said, oh gee, you're going to put this hospital on the map. It's going to be multiple births.
I'm a triplet, and my mother always told us, that is my twin brother Jerome and my older sister Sarah, that we're identical and the fraternal triplet was miscarried. And that was the story, and life goes on. But I was in primal therapy for several years in New York. And one of the first things you experience in primal therapy usually is a birth experience. And in my birth experience, I basically had this vision of this other entity. I was with my brother, and of course, things don't appear in an altered state. Things don't appear the way they seem in a kind of an accepted reality, we'll say a visual reality, a conscious reality. But there, I knew it was my brother. I knew we were together in this kind of shape, this kind of semi-transparent shape. And then I saw this other form separated from us, but also in the shape, but going away outside of my field of view. And when I told my mother this, she said, well, I'll call you back. I told her that because I came back from a kind of a heavy-duty weekend in primal therapy. And she called me back and she says, well, what happened is that she bolted out of bed, bolted in bed, I should say, in her about second month of pregnancy, and she had a spontaneous abortion. And they called the doctor, who at that time come over the house. They don't do that now. And it was Dr. Sarrell, a family doctor, and he basically attended to my mother, took the fetus away. And
I had a miscarriage, and the doctor thought it was twins, but he was very much surprised that I had twins at birth. It would have been triplets.
in a sense, that was a very important tie-in with me because I experienced death before I experienced life. And in a way, that could have been traumatizing, but who's to say, who's traumatized? I mean, I'm very happy to have been born. Maybe I would have been happier being the one who was spontaneously aborted. I don't know.
So all of these little babies you see, these little homunculus kind of figures, are the lost sister. So that he goes back and re-examines right down to his presence in the womb what his story is.
I got to the delivery room. Joel made his appearance. Yay! 5 minutes later, Joe. Yeah. So then, he had a 50-50 chance of surviving.
I didn't.
And he'll tell you the story that's famous, and we don't even know if it's real, but when he was 6, he was on his way to church with his mother, and there was a terrible accident, and a little girl was murdered, killed, and her head came rolling to the curb, and he bent to pick it up, and his mother pulled him away. And that was the camera that he never had.
It was an experience that actually happened. The accident actually happened. I read a few years ago that somebody actually interviewed my mother about that, and she said there was indeed an accident, and then she went to help some people. It was a crazy, crazy situation. A bunch of cars right in front of the house. But the most important thing is that what I got from the experience, basically I can connect with the way I make photographs.
He doesn't need the story anymore, though. I mean, there's just so much of the work now that bears out and is even better than the story.
My father was very, very influential for me. He would come over, when he did come over, and show me the newspapers, the Daily News, New York Daily News. And I thought that I was very, very grateful to see photographs. These are the first photographs I've seen. I'd see, family snapshots, but that's the people I knew. But when he showed me photographs in the newspaper, I thought that the world outside of our domain in Greenpoint as a child was all like this. The whole world was under siege. People were being bombed. Buildings were burning. People were dying. And I was fascinated by that because nothing really could basically make me sorry.
I wrote an essay about him, the first one I ever did, I think it was in the early 90s, for a little pocketbook on Joel. And I wrote this piece and then showed it to him at the University of New Mexico. He came to my office and I gave him the piece and I told him to go into the library and read it. And he came back to my office afterward and he couldn't even speak. And that's when he and I became friends.
The story, too, in Brooklyn that affected me greatly is that we lived in this apartment house that my grandfather actually had built. And my grandfather picked up rags. He was totally uneducated, a peasant from Sansa. That's my mother's father. And he would collect bottles and sell papers and rags back. And before long, he had 20 men working for him, and he was making a fortune. And was totally ignorant, and when the stock market crashed, he crashed. But anyway, in this apartment building was this man, the father of this little girl who was my contemporary, blonde girl, a beautiful little girl. I think I was in love with her, probably about 7 years old. And he came back from the Pacific Theater this is at the end of the war, and I was introduced to him, and I was fascinated by a mark in his neck, a scar. And I kind of figured that he was shot in the throat and lived. And I said to him, can I put my fingers in the wound? And he allowed me to do that. And I felt very, very, very pleased about this kind of dialogue, something very, very personal, very, very intimate. And that was, another experience of formation.
Usually I show an artist because I like the work, and then I build a commercial side. But for the case of Joel, in fact, when he was at Texborn Gallery, they needed to buy works to get the show, and in fact I was the one who financed the purchase. I was the mysterious financer. I met him at that time, in fact. And I did my first show in 1986. I did like the work, but in fact I was a little suspicious, wondering if it was really deep work or provocative only.